Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to What If Deku Had Returned by Death. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Fuck. Izuku pulled his hand back. He looked to the cliff wall, then back to Kota. His eyes widened, and he sucked in a breath. Back here again. Shit. This is just great. He placed his hands on the boy's shoulders and pushed him back. Fuck. Fuck. Hey, what gives? Just. Izuku heaved Kota up by the armpits, before putting him down again, adjusting him slightly as he manhandled him into position. Great. That should be just perfect. Now, just stand there and don't move a muscle. Wah. Izuku pressed his fingers up to Kota's lips. Not a muscle, he repeated. He stepped back, and then he continued to walk backwards, studying the stony wall beside him for familiar patterns. Eventually, he stopped. He looked back to Kota. Just where he left him. He relaxed. Ready? Now, Kota, he spoke, trying for a smile. It came off crooked. Whatever happens next, don't freak out. What does it even mean? When the wall broke asunder, Kota screamed, but Izuku was already in position. Quick as Muscular's reflexes may be, the dust created by his entrance obscured his vision, and he had no way to prepare for the boy who already knew the future. Frankly, he only had himself to blame for what happened next. Izuku's placement wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. Taking a step in front of Muscular to grab his hands and push them back was easy. The velocity of Muscular's body moving forward did most of the work. Izuku only really needed one for all to brace his own flesh to keep it from tearing itself apart from the force. He counted the snaps, 1, 2, all the way up to 10 and a few more. He let go, moving his fingers to points and pushing them into the soft tissue of Muscular's one remaining eye, and the hard metal that gouged scratches into his skin. The man screamed, an automatic response to the unexpected assault of pain. Izuku saw his opportunity and took it. He knocked his knuckles into Muscular's dentist grin, savoring the sound made as the teeth shattered on impact. Blood and bits of sharp enamel scattered in the air, some of it burying itself into Izuku's hand, some into his face and eyelids, as he closed them to protect the more sensitive tissue underneath. He spat in disgust when a few bits got into his mouth and pulled his fist back. For good measure, or maybe as a final fuck you, he grabbed one of Muscular's ridiculously bulging shoulders, before bringing his knee up and driving it as hard as he could into the villain's crotch. He didn't have time to be merciful, and he didn't much feel like it anyway. Muscular wheezed, dropping to the ground like a forgotten toy. Izuku backed up, breathing heavily. Fuck. He shook out his wrists. He turned to Kota. The boy was covered in sand and dust, with bits of debris scattered by his feet. None had gone far enough to hit him, and Izuku grinned in self-satisfied victory. Kota was fine. He was okay. Izuku's calculations had been perfect. Izuku took a step toward the boy. Kota squeaked and retreated, falling on his behind. His eyes were like dinner plates, staring at the scene in front of him. What the hell was that? What just happened? What did you do? Izuku refrained from commenting on the child's word voice. The kid earned himself a bit of swearing. Villain, he explained simply. He looked down at Muscular, body stretched out and hardly moving, aside from the occasional twitch. Blood flowed from his head, and soon it would run down the side of the cliff like a fucked-up waterfall. He moved his feet back as the viscous liquid closed in on him. I heard him coming. Now, come on. There's more out there. We need to get you to safety and deal with them. The lie came easily. He already figured Kota would demand an explanation from him, and this way they both left happy. He didn't feel guilty. The noise left Kota unbidden. A whiner whimper, muffled as its owner did his best to suppress it. His fists balled at his sides and his lips trembled, pressed together so tight they turned white. He blinked rapidly, tried his hardest to keep the tears inside and failed. He sniffed. Izuku walked up to him, lowering himself to one knee. Come on, he urged. He tried to put his hand on Kota's shoulder to rub it comfortingly, but stopped halfway when he watched Kota flinch. He put his hand on his knee. We need to leave. Now. Kota didn't say anything at first. His eyes were despondent, staring into nothing. Izuku snapped his fingers over his nose, and he blinked back to attention. Come on, Izuku repeated. He didn't want to get snappy with the kid, but they needed to hurry. He had no clue how much time they had to waste. Let's go. He turned around, presenting his back for a piggyback ride, just like last time. He glanced back at Kota, hardening his gaze until the young boy stood up on wobbly knees and climbed into position. His face was red and sticky with snot, sniffling occasionally, but otherwise stayed eerily silent. His arms felt loose around Izuku's neck, and the older boy pulled at them gingerly. Hold on tight. Don't fall off. Kota's grip tightened as Izuku stood up. He looked to the cliff's edge. Should he risk it? He felt Kota's forehead touch the hem of his t-shirt's neck, and pressed his teeth together. Turning around, he used one for all to dig his feet and fingers into the rock, and began to climb down. It wasn't as fast as jumping, but it was safer, and still faster than taking the mountain path he used to get up here. With 2 to 3 meters left to the ground, he dropped, bending his knees in time with the fall to mitigate damage. He turned, and after making sure Kota's arms were still secure, ran. He took the same path vaguely memorized from last time. It was hard to tell the trees apart as they all looked the same, and he didn't pay much attention the first time. Still, he had a general idea, going more on feeling than sight, trusting that his instincts would come through for him. Please be fast enough, he pleaded for any who would listen. Please, please, please. He saw a pale shape shift in the darkness, and leapt right toward it. Hey. The voice was abruptly cut off as Izuku stumbled into them face first. The stranger yelped, falling onto their back as Izuku smacked his face into their torso. Hananuki. Are you alright? Hananuki wheezed through compressed lungs, pushing on Izuku to free himself. Yeah, I'm fine, he hacked. He opened his eyes, wide and wide as they focused on Izuku. The stranger blinked. His hair was a shaggy blonde, but Izuku was more distracted by the set of gigantic teeth that took up half his face. Where'd you come from? No time to talk, Izuku said. He jumped off the 1B student, pulling the other teen to his feet as he did. Hananuki let out a noise of surprise, shifting his legs to balance himself. A villain will be here soon. His quirk is fire, so be ready. What? Hey. The girl Izuku didn't know the name of ran up to the trio. Her hair was green, reaching just a bit past her shoulders, with sharp eyes that shifted between them, clearly perturbed and slightly annoyed. She tapped her foot on the ground, eyeing Izuku from toe to tip. What's going on here? What's this about a villain? Were you Chaz? What's with the kid? Isn't that Mandalay's nephew? Look, Izuku put Kota down. He clasped his wrists in his hands tightly. If he pressed hard enough, he could stop them from shaking. I can answer your questions later, but now's really not the time. Just trust me on this. A villain's going to be here soon, and if we all want to get out of this alive, we need to work together to take him down. You wanna fight? Really? Hananuki appeared skeptical. He eyed Kota warily. If a villain's chasing you like you said, wouldn't it be better to run? No? There must have been something in the tone of his voice, because both Class B students winced. His fingers tightened their grip over his skin. It burned. The girl was the first to recover, and he could already see the protest ready on her lips. He elaborated. If we run, this guy's just going to go after someone else. Are you okay with that? Could you live with yourself if someone got hurt because you ran away? The girl and Hananuki exchanged a glance. They appeared hesitant, and for good reason. Izuku had seen firsthand what happened if these two were left to fight the villain on their own. Maybe telling them to run was the right choice. He could tell them to take Kota with them and leave Izuku to face the villain alone. But what if they ran into more trouble on their way to safety? What if they weren't strong enough to protect Kota or themselves and they all got killed? What if Izuku only found out when it was already too late? There was too much risk involved. He made a promise to keep Kota safe, and he intended to keep it. Well, when you put it like that. The girl scratched her cheek. White curls bounced over her shoulders with emotion. She looked less than thrilled, but that was fine. This wasn't a time for pleasantries. Great, Izuku nodded. Tell me your quirks so I've got an idea of what to work with. Mine's enhanced strength and speed, well, mostly. I don't know much about the villain, other than he can control fire somehow, and it's really fucking hot. So, if you've got something against that, that'd be great. I can soften anything I touch, so long it isn't alive. Don't think it'd be much help against fire though, Hananuki piped up. Name's Hananuki, by the way. You're Mido something, right? Midoriya. The girl exclaimed, grinning brightly. Midoriya, Izuku corrected. She pouted, and he almost felt bad. The expression was quickly wiped away as she introduced herself. Takage Sasuna. I can split my body into parts like a lizard, and I'm free to move them around in the air as I'd like. Pretty nifty, huh? Ha, Izuku's brows raised. That opened up a lot of questions. Too bad he didn't have time to ask them all. You're right. That is pretty nifty. She grinned. Hey. What about me? Hananuki pointed a finger to himself. My quirk is cool too, right? Both of your quirks are strong, Izuku reassured. His head already spun with ideas and implications. Neither's very useful against fire though. Maybe if we could catch him off guard then. Ah. Yeah. Takage cocked her head. You've got an idea. Maybe. Not a plan really, but... Izuku looked at Hananuki. He eyed him up carefully. When you say soft. How soft are we talking exactly? This time, Izuku was ready. He motioned his arm in an arc, moving air and earth alike forward in a rippling wave. The blue fire's path across the ground was halted, thrown into disarray and died before it reached him. The air was left heavy and hot in the aftermath, and Izuku's lungs felt heavy as he breathed deep to pull in enough oxygen to keep his head from swimming. Nice quirk you've got, kid. Nice reflexes too. Any slower and you'd be toast by now. Literally. Izuku's tongue tasted salty from the sweat dripping down his lips. Yeah. You've turned anyone into toast yet. The villain made a sound. Azure flames parted around him like Moses as he stepped through the thicket of trees, revealing a tall figure who looked more like a raggedy old scarecrow than a person. He had more scars than skin, with thick threads stitching the patchy skin together. Izuku wondered if it was to keep his flesh from bursting free, or if it was just some fucked up fashion statement. Dunno. This forest is burning pretty nicely, don't you think? Probably killed a few of your friends already. Then again, I guess you hero wannaps are a bit tougher than your average brat. It wasn't a definite no, but it wasn't a yes either. It was the best answer he could hope for, given the circumstances. I see. Anyway, how about we skip the witty banter and move straight to the part where you try to kill me, and I inevitably defeat you with the power of believing in myself. I really don't want this to drag out any longer than it has to. The scarred man's face was unreadable. He blinked slowly, then, without uttering a single noise, he raised his arm and jerked his fingers. A pillar of heat exploded in Izuku's direction, and he threw himself to the side in pure reflex. The fire moved past him, before bending and coming for his back. Izuku opened his mouth, throwing out a curse. Shit. This guy can't just create fire, he can control it too. Izuku sliced his hand through the air, throwing a burst of wind that pushed the flames off course. They didn't make a second move for him, instead fading off into nothing once it ran out of material on the ground to burn. The man raised his arm again. His pupils turned to pricks as they focused on Izuku. His expression was still just as unreadable as stone. Hey, ugly. Over here. The man spun on the spot. A tidal wave of fire followed the pendulum motion of his hand, moving for the trees. Don't. With another surge of one for all, Izuku punched a hook in the air that forced Mr. Firefuck lumbering to the side, along with his flames. They licked against his dark coat, before quickly dying. He's not immune to fire. Izuku jumped. If he can't stand his own flames, he'll be powerless in close-quarter combat. Or so he hoped. In either case, he was about to find out soon. He latched onto the tall villain's back, pushing him down to the ground. He grabbed one of the black coat's sleeves, turning the enemy over. One hand pressed down on the man's chest, the other raised to smash his face in, and add to his impressive collection of scars. Their eyes met. Izuku felt something brush against his stomach, and the man grinned. Immediately, Izuku pushed against the ground and jumped off the villain. A scarred hand rested where his gut was just seconds ago, small embers floating over the palm like glitter. Bummer. And I was just about to turn you to coal from the inside out. I see. He could have burned me too crisp in less than a second without taking any, or at least not much, damage to himself. No close combat then. This guy was really turning into a nuisance. He's been using his hands to direct his flames this whole time. Is it a requirement of his quirk or just for style? No, he wouldn't want to signal his moves, unless it was necessary. Or he's arrogant enough to think he can win either way. Izuku didn't have much choice but to assume the former. If he was wrong, he'd just have to try again. In the time Izuku spent mulling over his options, the villain returned to his feet. One hand was in his coat's pocket, the other raised, palm up, a cruel sneer on his ruined face. He lit the image of unflappable malice. The man eyed his left, then his right, but Izuku wasn't foolish enough to think he was distracted enough for Izuku to sneak ahead in. His opponent hummed. 2 little heroes against 1 villain. Isn't that unfair? His head shifted, fingers twitching. Question is, who do I kill first? You? Or whoever is hiding there in those trees? I thought I made it clear I don't care for your banter. Are you trying to waste my time? The villain's lips twitched. Ha. Sassy. Guys like you really annoy me. Izuku think this may be what they call a Mexican standoff. Both sides were hesitant to act, anticipating their opponent's next move. One good flick from Izuku's finger would be enough to take the man down, but he'd seen how the villain handled his flames. He could set them off faster than Izuku could use one for all. What Izuku needed was a distraction. He glanced into the branches and leaves over his head. To your left. The villain turned to the right. An oblong shape sped toward him, and he raised a mottled purple hand and fired. It turned to ash before it touched him. He opened his mouth to say something, but was beaten to the punch. I said your left. Should have listened. Two floating hands latched to the man's wrists from behind him. A girl's voice cackled, tugging on the tall villain, trying to move him. He dug his heels into the ground and tried to shake the offending hands off with little luck. Izuku saw his opening and pointed his fingers. Nice work, he called out, before flicking his index finger over his thumb. His opponent didn't have time to send out a new wave of flames before his feet left the ground and his body flung through the air by the gale Izuku created. Takage was still holding on to him, and she maneuvered the villain until his stomach was perpendicular with the ground. She pulled down, and her hands disappeared into the earth. The man followed, until he was sunk wrist deep into the softened ground. His knees scraped over the dirt where the ground was still hard, gaining traction as he tried to pull himself free. Hananuki, help me pin him down, the girl cried out. Two bodies jumped out of the pool of softened ground, one small, one large, the smaller clinging to the taller shape. On it. Kota let go as soon as he was free, landing on a patch of grass, while the large-toothed student pushed on the villain's back to keep his arms buried in the ground. From this angle, it was impossible for the man to overpower the body keeping him down. His brows drew together and Izuku saw his shoulders shrug. The man frowned, and Izuku couldn't help the small smile that played across his face. Guess you can't use your flames with your hands stuck in the ground, can you? It was phrased like a question, but it was more rhetorical than genuine. Izuku was sure that if the man could do something, he would have done so already. Guess you lose. He walked up to Hananuki. The other boy's face was twisted in a look of hard concentration, despite the villain's struggles showing little progress. Takage's headless and handless body climbed out of the pool, joining them. Her head emerged from the brush, floating and attaching itself to her neck. Her hands followed shortly after. She shrugged her shoulders, making a dull cracking sound. She sighed, satisfied. I say that was some pretty neat teamwork, huh? So, Midor, what do we do now? She poked her foot carefully into the villain's side. I don't suppose you have any rope we can tie him up with? Izuku shook his head. Even if I did, that's too risky. We can't give him a chance to break free. Yeah? Hananuki was hesitant when he took his eyes off of the enemy to look at Izuku. Then what are we supposed to do? Wait here until a teacher finds us. Izuku dropped to a crouch. I'm going to knock him out. That's dangerous. Takage protested. What if you end up giving him brain damage? If it happens in the midst of a fight, that's one thing, but this is premeditated. Like I said, I'm not taking any chances here. We'll knock him out, take him with us. Drop him off with a pro and let them handle the rest. If anything bad happens, I'll take full responsibility. So don't worry about it, okay? The Class B students exchanged a look. Reluctantly, they nodded. Alright. Takage conceded. Just be careful. Don't crack his skull open or anything. The villain for his part stayed silent. Maybe eerily so. Was he thinking up countermeasures? Did he already have a plan in place? He seemed awfully calm. Izuku shook his head. Never mind. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Maybe the man just had enough grace to accept when he was defeated. Izuku raised his fist. The villain looked at him. His eyes were just as blue as his flames. Ah, his mouth formed an "Oh, I know you." Izuku punched. There was a splattering noise, and a pungent odor filled his nostrils. He sputtered, drawing his palm down his face to clear it from the sticky substance. Hey, what did you do? That was Hananuki's voice. Izuku blinked dark spots out of his eyes, clearing his blurry vision. He looked down at the ground where the villain's body was just moments ago. Only a strange dark goo was left behind. I don't know, he admitted. He gathered a mound of dirt mixed with the strange liquid. He shifted it in his palm as he considered it. A fearful thought started to take form. He held back curse. I don't think that was the real villain. What do you mean? Takage stared at the empty spot, just as lost for words as the rest of them. She chewed on her lip, fidgeting with her hands. The left one was still floating in the air, the part it would usually attach to missing, leaving the girl with only half an arm. I don't know, but this means he's probably still out there. If I had to guess, this was just a clone or some type of body double. He looked at the girl's half-formed arm. Are you alright? Huh? Takage looked down to her floating fist, as if she'd somehow forgotten about it. Oh, don't worry about that. Give it some time and my arm will regrow. Doesn't even hurt or anything. Kinda itches, though, she smiled, like a big sister trying to reassure her younger brother. Izuku didn't have any siblings, but he was sure it must be something like this. So he's not dead. Hananuki looked relieved, but not enough to override his anxiety. I was scared for a second. I'm not ready to have that on my record. He laughed. It was shrill and a little too chipper. Painfully fake. Come on, Izuku urged. We should head back to the lodge. I'm sure a teacher will be there. They'll know what to do. Good idea, Takagi nodded. She looked over at Kota. With a wave of her hand, she motioned him over. Come on, kid. Let's go find your aunt. Kota was mute, only nodding numbly before running up to the girl. Maybe it was just his imagination, but when Izuku tried to meet Kota's gaze, he found himself ignored. It made him frown, but he decided to dismiss it for now. There were bigger properties to deal with first. Know the way? Hananuki slapped Izuku on the back. Maybe he was smiling, but it was hard to tell when his head was more teeth than face. Izuku nodded. He pointed. That way. He didn't need to say anything else before they were moving. Aizawa. Thank God. The teacher looked surprised to see them, but unmistakably relieved. Midoriya, his voice was monotone as always, but his shoulders slumped at their approach. You didn't go and break your bones again. I'm surprised. Ahaha, Izuku ran his hand through his curls awkwardly. Yeah. I got lucky. Anyways, I was thinking. Stop, Aizawa glared at him. I already know what you're going to say, and no, I won't let you put yourself in more danger than you already have. But. No buts. You four are heading back to the lodge where Vlad will look after you. Don't leave to go fight villains on your own. This is something you leave to the pros. Izuku ruminated for a moment. No. I'm sorry Aizawa, but I can't agree to that. Aizawa opened his mouth, likely to admonish him. Izuku gestured at Kota and the two Class B students behind him, pressing on. These three will head to Vlad, but I'm coming with you. I've already beat one of the villains, and we sorta beat another. Except it wasn't really him, but some clone or something, never mind, I can explain later. Point is, I won't be a liability, and I won't take no for an answer. I am going to fight, and I can promise you this. I won't die. Izuku had thought this through long and hard all the way to the lodge. He didn't like Kota leaving his sight, but he knew pulling the kid along into the thick of the villains was just asking for trouble. The lodge, protected by a pro and whoever of his classmates were there, was the safest place to be. Aizawa took a long breath. Problem child. He muttered. No. I can't accept that. I know you're stubborn, but no matter how stubborn you are, some things are just impossible. I'm a pro hero, but first and foremost, I am your teacher. My job is to care for and cultivate you, not send you head first into hopeless danger. You're going back to the lodge, and that's final. Izuku shifted his legs. He turned his head to look into the beast's forest. Fire and smoke licked at the trees, and in the distance, you could hear the cries and clashes of battle. Like I told you, Aizawa, he spoke, enunciating the words carefully. I wouldn't be taking no for an answer. Sorry. Before Aizawa could activate his quirk, Izuku dug his soles into the ground. A cloud of dust kicked up behind him as he activated One for All, and dashed to where the noise was loudest. Midoriya. Aizawa coughed. Izuku heard him draw on a phlegm and spat it out on the ground. Don't you dare. Come back here. Izuku hoped Aizawa would forgive him. He really hoped this wouldn't end up getting him suspended. Don't think a reset can fix that, he thought with a grimace. The sound of battle was almost drowned out by the wind in his ears. He arrived in an open area in the woods and saw Tiger and Mandalay engaged with two villains Izuku didn't recognize. One had a body completely covered in green scales, wielding a very inconvenient-looking weapon that could maybe be called a sword, if one was generous. Izuku thinks he remembers Muscular mentioning something about this one, the Ninja Turtle one-up, as he put it. The other was a tall and imposing figure, with a broad psyche similar to Tiger's. Would be nice if Muscular told me anything about their quirks, Izuku thought, before launching a kick through the so-called sword, and scattering it in 100 blades that exploded over the battlefield. Kid. Mandalay cried out at his approach. What are you doing here? Where's Kota? He's safe, back with Lat King. Izuku replied without missing a beat, skidding over the dirt to halt by the two heroes. Looking down, he saw Pixie Bob lying unconscious on the ground, and he grit his teeth. He looked from Tiger to Mandalay. Is she alive? She'll be fine, Tiger reassured, getting himself ready in a battle stance. You should get out of here, kiddo. This is no fight for children. Izuku shook his head. No. I'm staying. Midoriya. I'm staying, Izuku cut Mandalay's protests off. I can help. Now, tell me what these villains can do. Someone clicked their tongue. What a troublesome kid, the large villain spoke. What kind of teachers can't even handle their own students? Big Sis Magni, wait. The green one swung his arm out, not looking too cut up about the loss of his sword amalgamation. This is the kid Stain approved of. We shouldn't fight him. You mean the one Shigaraki once dead? Magni leered, showing her crooked teeth off. How lucky of us, to be the ones to run into him. Shigaraki will be a happy man when we bring this kid in. I'm still here, you know, Izuku wanted to say. Instead, he stayed silent, grabbing one of the scattered knives that belonged to the green villain. He threw it in the big one's direction, but she was quick enough to dodge it with a huff of breath. Didn't help that Izuku's aim was only subpar, though one for all helped in sending the weapon flying in a straight line. You sure don't waste any time, she said. She glared at her partner. Hey, Spinner, why don't you distract these guys long enough so I can get my thing back? But Spinner was cut off with a yelp as another knife launched in his direction. It split a shallow cut over his scaly cheek. Hey, no fair. You can't turn my own weapons against me. Sezu. The Geneva Convention. Izuku held a dagger in each hand, jumping for the villain. Spinner rolled out of the way with another noise of surprise. Stain. Says I. Spinner lay on the ground and took a page out of Izuku's book, throwing a blade towards the other. It was clear his aim was a lot better than Izuku's, though Izuku's reflexes were fast enough that he could knock the weapon out of the air with one of his stolen daggers. Spinner picked up as many blades as he could reach, throwing them one after the other at Izuku. This isn't very heroic, you know. I don't care, Izuku snarled through clenched teeth, running in a line to avoid the flying knives. I can't say I approve of this, Tiger called out, just as he threw himself at Spinner. He kicked the other back with a heel in the green man's stomach. But things are too tense to argue between each other. Just promise that you'll leave as soon as things get too dangerous for you. Fine, Izuku replied without zest. Tiger was right that this wasn't the time to argue. We'll definitely talk about this later, kitty cat, Mandalay's voice echoed inside his head. For now, watch the big one. In the commotion, the big one had managed to get her hands on what appeared to be a long cylinder wrapped up in a dirty piece of cloth. She shifted it over her shoulder and pointed it towards Izuku. She grinned, and Izuku felt his feet lift off the ground as he was sent sailing headfirst toward the villain. Izuku was still holding the daggers in his hands, and threw one towards her. Magni shifted her head, and the weapon missed her completely, sticking to the cloth of the cylinder. It didn't fall. A magnet, Izuku deduced. He held up the other knife in front of his nose, ready to slash once he got close enough. Mandalay charged the villain, the claws of her costume raised and ready. Magni saw her approach and cocked her head slightly in the heroine's direction. She shifted the weight over her shoulders, and thrusted the magnet in Izuku's direction. It punched into his stomach, and Izuku tightened his muscles to dampen the blow. It hurt, but the worst it would leave was a bruise. An invisible force tugged at his limbs, throwing them up in the air and stretched out to his left. Mandalay made a high-pitched noise as she was pulled in his direction. The magnet Magni drove into his stomach held Izuku in place, while the knife in his hand pointed at Mandalay's face. He immediately dropped it, except it didn't fall to the ground as expected, sticking to the skin of his palm like it had been glued there. He tried shaking it off, to no avail. He activated One for All and crumpled it like an empty can of soda, just before Mandalay smacked nose first into his clenched fist. The magnetic aura around her disappeared, and she dropped to the ground, clutching her nose. Magni grinned down at her handiwork, and Izuku took the momentary distraction to kick the villain in the stomach. She grunted, and Izuku fell. He distanced himself from the villain, bringing the pro-heroine with him. Damn. I should have realized approaching that villain with you already there was a bad idea. With a quirk like that, it's safest to fight her one-on-one, Mandalay spoke nasally, clutching her bloodied nose. What's her quirk? Some form of magnetism? Izuku asked. Yeah. I still haven't figured it out completely, but from what I saw, she was able to magnetize us both, and have us attract each other. But I think there's a certain range to her power, or we'd already be flying towards her again. You big brute. Spinner shouted from his side of the battlefield. Tiger had him clutched by his collar, and he was swinging a knife wildly through the air. Tiger had his arm stretched out, keeping the villain at a safe distance. Spinner threw the knife, and the hero dodged it by a tilt of his head. Let go, damn it. Magni made a noise, watching her partner struggle. She clutched the magnet in both hands, looking to something on the ground. Before Izuku realized what had got her attention, she moved. Pixie Bob's unconscious body floated up, attaching itself to the magnet. Crap. Mandalay showed off her teeth, claws trembling at her sides. Magni deactivated her quirk, holding Pixie Bob by the back of her shirt. Let's see now. What do I want to do with you? She shook the pro, like a baby shaking a rattle. Do I kill her now? Or keep her as a hostage long enough until you've been dealt with? You hear that? Spinner pointed a finger at Tiger. You better let me go now if you even care a little bit about your friend. Tiger growled. Veins stood out against the back of his hand as he pulled Spinner's collar taut. The gears in Izuku's head were spinning as he considered forms of approach. He couldn't throw any knives, as Magni was likely to magnetize Pixie Bob and turn Izuku's attack against him. He could throw himself at the villain, but he didn't know how Magni would use her quirk to counter him. He eyed the magnet in the large woman's hand. The knife he threw earlier was still attached to it. If he had to make a guess, Magni's magnetism only extended to people. She couldn't magnetize objects. The cylinder she carried was just a normal magnet, albeit unusually strong. Deciding to take the chance, he jumped at Magni. He was confident that Magni wouldn't hurt Pixie Bob so long she figured she could still use the hero as a hostage. Even with Izuku moving towards her, she would leave Pixie Bob alone until the very last moment. He had to act quickly. Damn it, Midoriya. Don't. Mandalay shouted after him as Magni activated a quirk. Izuku felt his momentum increase, but it didn't matter. She thrust the magnet out to punch him with it like earlier, but Izuku pushed his arms out in front of him and twined them around the magnet. He had to use one for all to have enough power to climb along the surface, feeling like an ocean was bearing down on him. He took a hold of the knife still attached to the magnet, stabbing it in Magni's direction. She reeled back, but Izuku followed her movements and cut a long line over her face from forehead to chin. She dropped Pixie Bob and the magnet. Izuku was free from the force of her quirk, and quickly kicked the magnet off into the distance. It crashed into a tree, breaking the trunk in two. He grabbed Pixie Bob and returned her to Mandalay. The heroine pulled her friend closer, checking the woman for any new injuries. That was a really risky move, she chastised him, but she looked relieved. Don't do something so reckless again. I'll try not to, Izuku replied, which was mostly true. He'd like to avoid any risky maneuvers if he could, but with no safer alternatives, he wouldn't hesitate. Back. Spinner choked as Tiger bared down on him. Big sis, you okay? I'm fine, Magni muttered. She wiped her arm over her face, sneering down at the curtain of blood that stuck to her forearm. Crazy kid. I'll make you pay for messing my face up. Izuku was about to reply, either with some clever retort or just a regular insult. Your face is already ugly enough as it is. If anything, I did you a favor. But his train of thought was derailed by a loud howl, catching them all off guard. The noise was somehow both a keening wail and a low rumbling roar at the same time. His eardrums vibrated along with the air, leaving a ringing sound behind, even after the voice fell quiet. It didn't take long before they heard another scream, along with cracks of breaking wood and the thundering of destruction. Izuku turned his head, and what he saw caused the breath to hitch in his throat. A massive dark mass stretched up towards the moon, pulling trees out by the roots, and flinging boulders left and right with no care where they landed. Is that Tokoyami? Izuku felt cold as he watched what must be an out-of-control dark shadow, tearing through the beast's forest like a human stomping through an anthill. What in God's name is that? Mandalay exclaimed. The fighting between villains and heroes temporarily ceased as everyone was stuck watching the monster level the forest with ease. Hey, Magni, this isn't one of our guys, is it? Spinner asked, staring slack-jawed at what was happening. Magni didn't answer, just as distracted as the rest of them. Fuck, Izuku swore, the first to pull himself out of the reverie. He repeated the curse, for good measure. Fuck. Midoriya. Mandalay looked at him, concerned. You know what's going on. It's Tokoyami. Must be, he replied, not even looking at her. He heard her inhale sharply. All this fighting must have caused his quirk to go wild. Fuck, the pro repeated his sentiments. This is a worst-case scenario. I'll have to send Aizawa, he can calm your friend down. Maybe, Izuku spoke through his teeth. That's assuming he's not already stuck fighting some villain. Mandalay. No, I'm not sending you off too. I have to. Izuku finally looked at her, throwing his arms out on both sides in an open gesture. Tokoyami is my friend. I have to help him before he does something he'll regret. Damn it kid, Mandalay shook her head. Don't look at me like that. How am I supposed to argue against you like that? I'll stay safe, Izuku promised. Just promise you'll do the same. Don't worry about us. I think we've got a handle on these guys, now. Just. You better not make me regret this, or I'll never be able to catch a wink of sleep again. Mandalay, Tiger cut in. He still had Spinner in his grip, but the villain was too preoccupied watching Dark Shadow to struggle. We can't let him. I know, Mandalay's eyes hardened. But do you honestly think we could hold him here and fight these villains at the same time? Tiger didn't answer. Just glared at Spinner. Spinner didn't react. I'm going to be fine, Izuku looked at both pros as he spoke. He cast a quick glance to Pixie Bob, resting in Mandalay's arms. I promise. He didn't waste another minute, running off into the forest after the screaming Tokoyami. He heard the fighting pick back up behind him, and prayed the heroes would come out of it okay. This is the worst, he thought. This is the absolute worst. He dodged a tree flying in his direction, not letting it interrupt his rhythm as he got closer to his rampaging classmate. He was trying to think of ways to calm the other boy down, not wanting to rely on the feeble hope that Aizawa would show up just in time to put a stop to the fighting. He was going to need light, and a lot of it. He just didn't know how he was going to get it. If he knocked Tokoyami out, would that put a stop to his quirk? Or would Dark Shadow continue his rage, unaffected by his inert master? Even if he did knock the other out, he couldn't be sure he wouldn't do some irreparable damage to Tokoyami in the process. Part of the forest the fire villain set ablaze was still caught in a raving inferno. If Izuku could lead Tokoyami in that direction, then maybe it would be enough to return his classmate to normal. It was the only semi-solid plan he had to work with, save for a miracle. Izuku pulled to a stop. Tokoyami was less than 100 meters away from him, and didn't appear to have noticed him yet. The crowboy didn't appear entirely aware of his surroundings in general, ripping up trees at random and throwing them without aim. Izuku caught sight of a familiar shape on the ground, coated in red. His stomach dropped, and he ran up to it quickly. "Shoji," he called out, half a whisper, half a shout. He didn't want to catch Dark Shadow's attention yet. Shoji didn't answer, and Izuku checked his pulse. It was slow, but there, and he was breathing. Alive, but just barely. Izuku pinched his face to keep from crying in relief. He pulled out a strip of cloth from the bottom of his shirt, gingerly tying it like a bandana over the gash that split Shoji's hair apart to stem the bleeding, before standing. He'd like to bring the other to safety, but he needed to deal with Tokoyami, and he was afraid moving Shoji around without a proper assessment of his injuries could aggravate the wounds further. He ran, making a quarter of a circle around Tokoyami. He wanted to ensure that when his out-of-control classmate caught sight of him, he would move away from Shoji. He climbed to the top of the nearest and tallest tree with a single jump, taking in the beast's forest from his new vantage point. He saw dark smoke in the distance, guiding him like a compass. Horse set, he turned to Tokoyami. He breathed in as much air as his lungs could hold, before shouting. "Hey!" he bellowed. "Over here." Dark Shadow caught sight of him immediately. He bent forward, and two clawed hands the same size as small cars dug into the earth. He pulled, leaping towards Izuku with a two-tone screech. Izuku sucked in a breath, not expecting Tokoyami to be as fast as he was. He turned, jumping between treetops to where he saw flames lick the sky. Just like that. He called out behind him, throwing a one-for-all charge punch under his feet to push himself forward. Black claws swiped the air where he'd been just seconds before. "Just keep following me." Tokoyami's only answer was a ghastly howl. He ripped a tree from under Izuku's feet, and the freckled boy stumbled. He tucked himself into a ball, rolling over the ground. He pitched a rock into Dark Shadow's shoulder, but it hardly seemed to affect him. It shattered on impact. "Midoriya!" he wailed, and Izuku's heart jumped into his throat. Whatever semblance of sanity Izuku thought his classmate regained seemed to be for naught, as another pair of claws reached out for him. Izuku avoided them just in time, and Tokoyami groaned. "Shoji!" Crystal liquid ran down his face. Tears. He was crying. One of Tokoyami's eyes met Izuku's, pleading. It only lasted for a second before his living shadow swallowed his head whole, leaving a luminous and bottomless white pit behind. His black beak opened, and he screamed. It drilled right into Izuku's core, almost freezing him to the spot. "Soon," he promised, mouth turning dry from all his shouting as he continued to run. "I'm going to fix you soon." Izuku was almost bisected when an ivory blade cut across his path. He ducked under it just in time, crashing into the ground and tearing his chin up in the process. He pushed himself up to his knees, scrambling to move before Dark Shadow pulverized him with his fist, or turned him into ribbons with his claws. He'd arrived in a glade, and his eyes followed the jagged line of white that almost forced him into a reset, avoiding another strike from Tokoyami at the same time. "Are you kidding me?" he proclaimed, catching sight of what must be another villain. He looked to be dressed in some type of fetish gear, clad in a black leather straitjacket and spider gag. A labyrinth of white lines connected to his teeth, stabbing into the ground and forming a sharp and deadly cage. It took Izuku another second before he realized those were his teeth, just incredibly stretched out and deformed. Disgusting. Of course he was going to run into another villain when he already had enough to worry about on his plate. It seemed to be a running theme with him, ever since joining UA. "Eat," the villain chattered, gnashing his teeth together as well he could. "Meat." It was as far as he got before Tokoyami slapped him into the ground. His teeth shattered, and his head cracked against a rock. He didn't get up. Holy shit. Izuku recognized that voice. He whipped his head to the side, finding a familiar angry blonde. His red eyes gawked bug-eyed at the downed villain. "What the actual shit?" he continued, before noticing Izuku. "Deku. What the fuck?" Koch-chan, Izuku breathed. I don't think I've ever been as happy to see you as I am now. Bakugo uttered a sound of indignation. A small cliff of ice was behind him, and a frazzled-looking Todoroki stepped out from behind it. What's going on? He asked. Tokoyami had momentarily paused his attacks, appearing distracted by the deathly still villain. Is that Tokoyami? Izuku's shoulders went slack. He took a shuddering breath. Todoroki. I am so happy right now, you have no idea. Todoroki didn't look convinced. His disinclination didn't last long however, as Tokoyami soon lost his interest in the tooth villain, and now eyed his classmates like a hawk watching its prey, which wasn't too far from the truth. Todoroki. Koch-chan. I'm going to need you to create as much light as you possibly can. Now. Bakugo opened his mouth, probably to tell Izuku to fuck off and not tell him what to do, when a sharp claw moved towards him. Izuku drove his elbow into his stomach at the same time Bakugo ignited his palms in the shadow's direction. Dark shadows screeched in protest and they stumbled to the ground, leaving Bakugo sputtering. You fucking idiot. He barked. I fucking had him. Todoroki, Izuku turned to his two-toned classmate. Fire. Now. The boy didn't need any further prompting, and he raised his left hand to unleash a tornado of fire that rose like a pillar over Tokoyami. The shadow shied away from the glow, pupilless eyes seeking like a homing missile for the culprit behind it. They found Todoroki, charging him to cut off the source of his weakness. Koch-chan. Izuku demanded the blonde's attention. More light. Thankfully, Bakugo listened for once, jumping after Tokoyami with burning fists. How'd you like this, birdbrain? He cackled, increasing the size of his explosions bit by bit as Dark Shadow reeled back, away from Todoroki. The explosions were at their peak, a glory of fire and power, before abruptly fizzling out. Fuck. The blonde shook out his arms and wiped a hand over his forehead to gather as much sweat as he could to replenish his ammunition. His palms crackled back to life, and he and Todoroki worked together to drive Dark Shadow back, and slowly shrink him to a size where its user could regain control. Keep going. Izuku called out over the cacophony of fire and explosions, feeling a little useless. He took a broken branch and used Todoroki's fire to light it up, waving it at Tokoyami. He wasn't sure it did anything, but it made him feel a little better. Just a little more. Just keep holding out. Fat beads of sweat dripped down Todoroki's brow. He grit his teeth, keeping up the inferno without complaint, not able to afford the distraction. Midoriya Tokoyami called out his name for the second time. His voice was returning to normal, and he looked to be trying his hardest to fight back against his haywire quirk. His beak hung open in a silent cry, and Izuku gave him a reassuring smile. Almost there, Tokoyami, he said. You're almost there. He was there. And then he wasn't. Izuku blinked. What? Whoops. Sorry, were you using that? The man balanced atop a tree branch. His face was obscured by a black and white mask, and he twirled something small and round between his fingers with practiced ease. A marble. One for all exploded in Izuku before he even realized it, and he screamed. What did you do? This must be my lucky day, the man continued, ignoring the boy's outburst. Both targets right next to one another, and a little bonus to boot. Shigaraki will be overjoyed. Maybe I'll even see him smile, for once. Izuku sprung for him, fists raised. He roared, fully intending to hit the man with the full force of One for All. I'm so goddamn tired of all these goddamn villains. Everything went black. He tried to twitch his muscles, but they wouldn't budge. His fist was still raised in front of him, frozen in time. He couldn't even breathe. What? He tried to blink. Useless. What just happened? Dark. As far as the eye could see, the blackness stretched on, just as deep and endless as space. Izuku counted the seconds, not just to stay sane, but also to gauge how long he spent in here. 346. 347. 300 and wait, was it 7 or 8? Despite knowing how useless it was, he tried to bite down on the capsule in his mouth. He'd been doing so well, until that mask-wearing asshole showed up and did God knows what. It was frustrating, being so close and then having it all go to hell. His chest felt strangely constricted. He couldn't contract or expand his lungs, but no matter how much time passed, he didn't pass out of oxygen deprivation or feel any of its effects. His head was clear, and his eyes didn't sting despite staying open for so long. A pocket dimension. Infinite space that immobilizes whatever is caught in it. Does it only work on people or can it be used on objects as well? What about something less tangible, like air heat? How long is he going to keep me here? How long can he keep me here? It was a terrifying thought, to think he could be left in this emptiness forever. If its user died, would he be set free? Or would it make escape impossible and doom him to an eternal existence of nothing? Something whispered in the back of his ear. Soft like a buzzing mosquito, hardly there but impossible to ignore. It caressed his eardrums like silk, tantalizing and demanding attention. If he concentrated, he thought he could make out words, but he didn't understand any of them. They blended into one another, a warbled mix of vowels and consonants. Was he finally losing his mind? Or, he thought, even worse. What if this was the darkness around him, coming to life, here to swallow him whole? A living creature made of nothing, eating him alive like dark shadow consumed Tokoyami. Except Tokoyami was still there, under all those layers of darkness. Izuku would be ground to dust, and then that dust would be ground to nothing. Izuku would cease to exist entirely, and he wasn't sure his quirk could save him from that. Just as the fear was so overwhelming, Izuku was sure its cold grasp would never let him go. Black bled into color. It was still dark, but instead of the ink-deep void from his stagnant prison, these were shades of gray and dirt brown. The contrast was so strong, he might as well be looking at a rainbow. In front of him was a wooden floor stained with suspicious spots of unknown origins, brick walls, and a long slab of wood with stools clad in faded red bolted to the floor in a row next to it. One for all fizzled out as he took stock of the new situation he'd been thrown into, not wanting to cause untold destruction, until he knew for sure what was happening. Motherfuckers! Someone screamed. Izuku spun on his heel, searching for the voice. Cack. He choked, unable to finish his sentence as a thick smog invaded his lungs. The room turned blurry as a mysterious fog engulfed it, and Izuku squinted in an attempt to fight against his lowered vision, groping blindly for the dark outline of Bakugo's shadow. Koch-chan. Bakugo turned in his direction. He extended a hand, reaching for Izuku's. Their fingers hovered just centimeters apart when, for the second time that day, everything went dark. Wakey wakey, hero, a raspy voice filtered in next to his head. It was barely above a whisper, but it jolted Izuku awake, back straight and ready for a fight. He was greeted by the cracked grin of Shigaraki Tomura, leering down at him. Hello, the raspy voice welcomed him, giving Izuku a small wave with a spindly-looking hand. Izuku didn't bother returning the greeting, opting to peer around the dimly lit room cautiously instead. It was the same room from before he passed out. Now that he had more time to take it in, he realized it was some kind of bar. A shelf lined one wall, carrying an array of differently colored and labeled bottles, that looked to be there more for decor than anything else. If this place had a theme going for it, Izuku would describe it as sketchy. Or maybe that was just his bias talking, as he was currently surrounded by a small crowd of villains. More concerning than that, however, were the two occupied chairs next to him. Bakugo flexed his muscles, but it did little to budge the array of leather straps binding him down. His hands were covered, palms turned to press into each other to discourage the use of his quirk. A bright clinical light had been positioned to shine down on the other chair, though its occupant had yet to wake up. Even with his eyes closed, Tokoyami didn't look rested. The corners of his eyes twitched fitfully, and he shivered. The man with the mask stood next to him, his hand resting on the bird boy's head. His classmates' chairs were made of ordinary wood, but when Izuku looked down at his own, metal shined back. Shackles squeezed his wrists and ankles to the legs and armrests, and he tried channeling a bit of one for all, testing his bond's sturdiness. Don't even try, Shigaraki hissed. That chair isn't meant to hold you, only slow you down. If I even so much as suspect you're trying to escape, your friends will be the ones to get it. He jabbed a thumb in Bakugo's and Tokoyami's direction for emphasis. The explosive blonde glared at the appendage like he wanted to bite it off, but the gag covering his mouth made it impossible. No matter how much he worked his jaw, only muffled sounds escaped. Shigaraki continued. Assuming you're not a completely heartless bastard, you'll cooperate, won't you? After all, these are the people you've been fighting so hard to protect. Correct. What do you want? Izuku refused to give Shigaraki the satisfaction of seeing his fear. He kept his tone hard and direct, meeting the villain's red gaze head-on. He touched the cyanide capsule in his mouth with his tongue, but didn't bite down. He didn't want to waste the chance to ask Boss Man himself some questions. Shigaraki didn't answer right away. His face split in two with glee, figuratively and almost literally. The corners of his mouth bled from the dry skin pulling apart at the seams, and the man didn't even flinch. He opened his mouth, speaking with a voice that was akin to nails on a chalkboard. I want to hear you scream. A viscous feeling settled in Izuku's gut, heavy, but he refused to let it show. Keeping his voice and face neutral, he asked, Is that all? Shigaraki's face twisted. He raised his hand, ready to strike. But then, he smiled, and all his ire bled out with a dark chuckle. His hand stayed where it was, hovering in the air, threatening. With you? No. There is nothing else I want. Izuku peered Bakugo's and Tokoyami's way. Tokoyami was still asleep, as expected, but Bakugo was staring at Izuku. His gaze was intent, fixed. Izuku could see the blonde's coiled muscles tense under the leather bonds, probably testing for any weaknesses, searching for any point that would give. His eyes moved from Izuku to Shigaraki, sharpening once they reached the latter. There was a dark smolder in his pupils that Izuku had never seen before, and he struggled to interpret it. I have other plans for your friends, Shigaraki provided, sensing Izuku's train of thought. They'll live, so long they do as I say. You, on the other hand. He brought a hand up to touch his face, caressing the upturned points of his mouth, feeling out his smile as if it was a stranger in the dark. You're not getting out of here alive. Izuku heard Bakugo shift, but he didn't look at the blonde, too preoccupied with studying every minute movement Shigaraki made. He blurted out, "Is this about the mole? Is this about the mole?" Shigaraki repeated in a mocking high-pitched note, looking incredulous. "Yes, this is about the fucking mole." Izuku bit back a scream when the man placed a hand on his shoulder. His skin felt like it had been set on fire as Shigaraki's quirk dissolved through cloth and skin, with the same difficulty as kicking a sleeping toddler. He stopped once he reached muscles, apparently not willing to give his captive too quick of an end. Spiderweb cracks traveled over the length of Izuku's skin, bleeding red and growing in length with every shifting movement. Someone growled, deep and low in his chest. Bakugo. Shigaraki ignored it, moving to Izuku's other shoulder. "Hey, wait." One of the villains called before Izuku could. He jumped in between his boss and Izuku, waving his arms. It was the green one, Spinner. Fuck. If he was here, then what happened to Mandalay and Tiger? Look, I know this kid messed with you, but isn't this kind of fucked up? I'm not sure I like the idea of killing him, but if you have to do it, why not be quick about it? Out of my way, Scaly, Shigaraki sneered. This is my territory, my group. I make the rules, and if you don't like him, then you can either die or leave. Come on, Spinner, Magni spoke, nuzzling a glass of bourbon in one of her large hands. The glass was dwarfed between her fingers. Let the man do what he wants. There's no point getting worked up about it. She threw the glass back in one gulp. But, you heard Magneto. Out of the way. Or you're next, Shigaraki glared at his subordinate. Spinner glanced between him and Izuku, caught between a rock and a hard place. Then, he shrugged. Sorry, kid, he said. I'll come visit your grave, okay? I don't need your sympathies. If you really felt bad, you wouldn't just stand there. Izuku grit his teeth. What happened to them? Izuku asked. To the heroes you fought. Spinner glanced to Magni, as if he was looking for permission. The woman smirked, that crooked ugly grin of hers. Wouldn't you like to know? She said, turning on the stool she sat on to give herself a better vantage point, waiting for his reaction. Izuku slumped his shoulders. Thank God, he sighed. That means they're alright then, or you'd already be rubbing it in my face. Magni sneered, and the glass in her hand cracked as she clamped her fingers around it. Kurogiri gave her a disapproving look, which she pointedly ignored. She threw the glass down on the floor with a click of her tongue. Enough. Shigaraki glared at Spinner and Magni. If you're going to be such a bother, then go away. This is my time, and I won't let you assholes ruin it. Without warning, he put his fingers on Izuku's uninjured shoulder, dissolving it much like he did the first. Izuku's exposed muscles stung in the open air of the dirty bar, and he held his breath to keep any whimpers inside. Even the smallest of movements rang the warning bells in his brain, telling him that something was wrong. Stop moving, stop. Shigaraki dug his nails into the exposed wounds, and Izuku gasped. The man didn't use all of his fingers, preventing Izuku's shoulders from dissolving any further, but it was far from a mercy. That's the first, Shigaraki grinned. Next, I'll make you sing. Someone laughed, high in pitch and sharp like a cat's claws. Oh, he's so cute. Please, Shiggy. Just one little stab, please. Shigaraki didn't pay the blonde girl sitting on the bar top, playfully swinging her legs back and forth, any attention. His eyes were glued on Izuku, drinking in any twitch of pain or sign of discomfort he found in the boy's face or body language. He brought one of his hands up, fingers outstretched. He moved them to a point, hand shaped like a cone, before moving the tips closer to Izuku's face. First, the vision became clear. Izuku could count the grooves and bumps on the pads of the villain's fingers. But as they inched closer, they turned into blurry spots, impossible to focus on. Izuku attempted to rear his head back once he realized the man's intent, but Shigaraki easily caught him with his free hand, pulling on his scalp and digging with his nails, until Izuku was sure he drew blood. He squeezed his eyes shut, despite knowing how useless it'd be. A dark chuckle reverberated from in front of him. You know that won't help you, Shigaraki said. Izuku's eyes remained closed, unable to bring himself to open them. He heard the chair next to him bang and rattle against the floor furiously, and he wondered what was going through Bakugo's mind right now. Was he scared? Angry? Or did he just think of Izuku as a pathetic, helpless Deku? Would Bakugo mourn his death if he could? Dry skin brushed against an unprotected eyelid. Pressing, prodding, piercing. When those fingers burned through the thin patch of skin and finally reached the green eyeball beneath, Izuku screamed. For the third time that day, everything went dark. But this time, he could feel. Hey, kid. Listen to me. Don't go. I said wait, you need to listen to me. What? Izuku didn't know who the voice belonged to or where it came from. Everything was dark. Was he back in the masked guy's prison? But this felt different somehow. Wherever he was now, he couldn't feel his body. Only his mind, floating like a ghost in the void. That's right, just like that. Stay with me, kid. Listen up, our connection is still weak, so we don't have a lot of time. Now, you're going to need to pay all the attention you can to what I say. Izuku thought he could see the outline of a person. It was white, staticky. A man. He was waving his arms as he spoke. He put one of his glowing hands on Izuku's non-existing shoulders, pulling on him. Wait, no. It's too early. You can't. The man's hand slipped free and the man started to shrink. He broke out into a sprint, chasing after Izuku, but no matter how fast he moved, he only appeared further and further away. Izuku reached out for him, trying to catch his hand, opening his mouth to shout something. Wakey wakey, hero. Izuku started awake, drenched in sweat and shivering. What? He blinked the blur out of his eyes. There was a memory in the back of his head, quickly fading. He tried to catch it, but the harder he tried to remember, the more it tapered into meaningless dribble. All he recalled was the voice. What did it say? I need to remember, I have to remember. Shigaraki snapped his fingers in front of his eyes. Hey, brat. Listen when I'm talking to you. He lowered his hand, sneering at his captive. He threw his arms out, gesturing at his lair like a proud mother. This is my place. What do you think? It's gonna be the last thing you see, so take it all in while you still can. Izuku's eyes rode from left to right, registering his surroundings as much and fast as he could. Kurogiri behind the bar, the blonde girl, Magni and Spinner. A young boy sitting in the dark by one of the tables, staring down at the bottom of an empty glass. The man with the mask standing between Bakugo and Tokoyami. No, Izuku trembled in the shackles holding him down. No. He didn't consider the consequences when he started to pull himself free. It was too early, the checkpoint couldn't have moved, not now, not here. Not here. No. Fucking hell, that was Magni. Shut up, kid, would you? Where'd all that cockiness from before run off to, huh? This is just pathetic. Izuku didn't pay her words any mind. One for all buzzed in him and the metal over his wrists and ankles creaked. He didn't have a plan, he just needed to do something. Stay still, Shigaraki hissed. He put his hands on Izuku's shoulders, and Izuku didn't have the mind to hold his gasp back. No, please, he struggled, even as Shigaraki reached his flesh. This isn't right. I can't be here. It's too early. This isn't right. I don't give a fuck what's right or not. Shigaraki pushed him into the backrest of the chair. He moved his hands from Izuku's mottled shoulders and dug them into the boy's scalp. Dark green locks turned ashen gray and drifted to the floor like leaves in fall. Izuku felt like his skull was boiling out of his skin, and no matter how he twisted and pulled, he couldn't escape the constant searing pain. Bakugo tried to speak under his gag. He roared, but it sounded hoarse, muted. His chair shook as he tried to pull himself free. Izuku listened to it, trying to slow his breath, ignoring how it felt like he was slowly burning alive. Hey, this is going too far, it was Spinner again. He pulled on Shigaraki's shoulder. I mean, this is the guy's stain. Shut the fuck up, Shigaraki shoved Spinner away with his elbow, but he let Izuku go. Izuku had the distinct feeling it was only because Shigaraki didn't want his fun to end so soon, and not out of guilt. Like last time. You're not the boss here. I don't have to listen to shit you say, so piss off. Surprisingly, the pain was helping Izuku stabilize himself. His thoughts started to pull into a semblance of coherency, like re-spooling a thread. He couldn't let himself panic, even though things looked to be the worst-case scenario. He didn't understand how his quirk worked exactly. How much time he was sent back in time was never the same, but there had always been a way out of it. That wouldn't have changed now, would it? There must be a way out. Had to be. He just needed to think and find it. Okay? He sucked in a lungful of air. Okay. I'm calm. Shigaraki clicked his tongue. Did I ask you? Do I look like I give a fuck about your feelings? Izuku looked up. Shigaraki leaned over him, his long hair falling forward and casting his face in shadow. No, he did not have the face of someone who cared. At least, not the face of someone who gave a smidgen of a fuck whether Izuku was comfortable or not. Would probably prefer if he wasn't. Look, you don't need to kill me, Izuku said, trying to think of an argument that would convince Shigaraki he was right. I mean, wouldn't I be more valuable as a hostage? Is that an advantage you can afford to lose? I don't need a fucking hostage. The heroes won't find us here. What I need is to see you dead. Okay. Let me think. There must be a way to convince Shigaraki to let him live and leave him alone. Then, all he needed was an escape plan, and everything would be dandy. He'd break himself, Bakugo and Tokoyami out of here. Easy. He'd worked with worse odds before, right? Maybe. No, Shigaraki lifted his hand. I'm tired of listening to your whiny sniveling. Now, I wanna hear you scream. Wakey, hero. Izuku pulled himself free and jumped, aiming for Shigaraki. He turned to dust before he could even feel it. Wakey, hero. Izuku pulled himself free and jumped, aiming for Shigaraki. This time, he avoided his hands. One for all blasted through his abdomen, splitting the man in two. Magni barked as her shirt was covered in his guts. Spinner jumped back to hide behind the bar with a yelp. Kurogiri dropped the glass he was cleaning, breaking it open on the ground at the same time as he opened a portal. Izuku heard the snap of bone and jerked his head in its direction. The man with the mask twirled a white marble on the tip of his pointer finger, patting Bakugo's shoulder with the other. Tokoyami slumped forward, and a spurt of red formed an arch before it soaked into the wooden floor with a splat. His head was gone. Izuku's breath stuttered, caught between a scream of fury and a weeping howl. Don't move, or I'm taking this arm next, he said, squeezing Bakugo's shoulder. He flicked the marble in Izuku's direction and snapped his fingers. With a poof, it returned to its original state. Tokoyami's head bumped against Izuku's foot with a wet thud. Izuku stared at it numbly. He pushed his head up, meeting the man's eyes beyond the shadowed holes cut into the pristine mask. He raised his finger, pointing at the man. With less emotions than he was feeling, he spoke. You're going to pay for this. All of you. He fought for all he had, even when he was more broken than whole. It wasn't out of any desire to continue this future. His motivation was nothing more than the fact he could, and he wanted to. Crushing the mask in his hand felt good. Wakey, hero. Izuku pulled himself free and jumped, aiming for Tokoyami. He shattered the mask of the man behind him with one punch, along with his head. The wall was painted a mix of red and gray behind him. What the hell? Spinner lurched back, sticking his hands and feet to a wall. Oh? The blonde girl looked intrigued, waving a box cutter in front of her face. Squishy. Izuku turned to Shigaraki. You're next. Oh, for fuck mustard. Do something already. He shouted, stumbling backwards. The kid by the table's side, before a purple fog filled the room. For the who's even counting anymore. Time that day, everything went dark. Wakey, hero. Izuku opened his eyes. He looked at Shigaraki for the longest time, watching his lips move, but hearing nothing. He closed his eyes, and he cried. Kid. You're back. Izuku tried to turn, but his body didn't exist. There was only the voice, coming from every direction, a murmur and booming at the same time. You've really gotten yourself stuck in a terrible situation, haven't you? Can't say I envy you, but don't worry. I'm here to help. Help? Who are you? Izuku spoke, thought, something. He didn't have a mouth, but his words were clear. In either case, the voice seemed to understand him, as it answered. I can tell you who I am later, once you get out of this. But I only have so much time, and I don't want to waste it when there's more important things to do. How the hell are you going to help me? I just keep dying over and over, and what was supposed to be my failsafe has been rendered useless, since I always start in the same shitty spot. If there's something you can do to get me out of this hell, then spit it out already. You need to calm down. I know it's hard, but you're going to need a clear head when you listen to me. You've still got an ace up your sleeve, when you don't know about yet. It's wakey, hero. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.